Hi, everyone. This is Sarah Reitmeyer, the Chief Science Officer for Public Square Analytics. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about the research that we are doing at Public Square Analytics and that Bruce Uru and I are doing while we wear our other hats as faculty members at Penn State and at the University of Pittsburgh. Faculty members, we shared recently through our blog and social media piece that Uru wrote for the conversation. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more, take this opportunity, tell you more about the scholarly work that informed that conversation piece, and then more broadly about a couple other recent papers we've written and how that research kind of is front of mind, back of mind, all the time in the work that we do at Public Square Analytics, and show you some of the scholarly papers kind of like behind the scenes, especially if you haven't seen scholarly work behind the scenes before. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start by just sharing that conversation piece really briefly and then share the raw text of the scholarly work with you. So here's the piece that we shared from the conversation. It's titled, "Some Politicians Who Share Harmful Information Are Rewarded with More Clicks, Study Finds." And this is kind of a classic headline. And sometimes these news articles do link to studies. This one does, right? And Yuru did a really nice job of summarizing it, says why it matters and so forth. If you have had an opportunity to read it, hopefully you found it insightful. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. What I want to do right now is share with you the original piece. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you the study. So let me share the PDF. It was this one, okay? So this is the paper. You see Yuru was an author, as was Bruce, our CEO. So they worked together on this paper. And the original scholarly paper was entitled "Political Elites in the Attention Economy, Visibility over Civility and Credibility" was the title. And it was published in ICWSM, which is a conference that scholars attend to discuss work in media, social media, and web science. And it starts with this abstract. The abstract of a paper like this one usually is a summary, a brief summary of the main points of the work. I highlighted here like a couple things I want to just share with you. So they looked at 6,500 state legislators' social media accounts. And their research question was asking, how is the visibility of these legislators' accounts impacted by whether they post low credibility or uncivil content, right? Like, are they going to post this stuff just to get attention? And is it going to work, right? Is it going to get visibility? And so in order to do that, they had to make some decisions. How are they going to operationalize those concepts? What's low credibility and how will they recognize it when they see it? What do they mean by uncivil, right? And so in this paper, which is several pages long, they define those things. But I just want to highlight for you some of kind of like their main conclusions and takeaways, which they do summarize here at the end of the introduction. So they find that Republicans and men tend to have a higher level of visibility on Facebook, while Democrats tend to have higher visibility on Twitter. So their study runs on two platforms, Facebook and Twitter. And then with respect in particular to the harmful content, they find that posting uncivil content on Twitter leads to a decrease in visibility. And then for Republicans, posting low credibility content on both platforms leads to increased visibility, but Democrats posting the same has lower visibility. And this effect is more pronounced for ideologically extreme legislators. So in this case of the scholarly work, right, they can't just say that. This has to be backed up with a lot of definitions, and they have to describe how they design this, how they collect their data, how much data they collect. Many scholarly venues require that they share this data. And then this paper and the data is subject to the review by several peers in the scientific community. Often this review is anonymous, either two-way anonymity or one-way anonymity, but the statistics of how everything was done is also reviewed. This is all part of the scientific process, and it's described. One important section is the limitation section, which is at the end where, it's clear here, for example, that they only looked at the years 2020 and 2021. So you as a reader can, think about that and think about the nuance that brings. So perhaps you think, okay, well, that was COVID and those were special times. And so maybe there's something to think about there, right? And so lots to chew on, certainly. But from the perspective of our public square analytics hats, right? These are things that we have in the back of our minds at all times when we are doing our work, right? This knowledge, these views through which, these lenses through which we see our day-to-day work. I want to share with you another recent study. This was published in a political science journal last year. This is work done by our CEO, Bruce, and colleagues. And this paper looked at the national network of US state legislators on Twitter. So also a study of elected officials on social media. This was focused on Twitter only. And in this one, they actually built the network. I'll show it to you right here if you love fancy visualizations of network connections, of Twitter connections, follows, and ties on social media between state level legislators. And blue are Democrats, red are Republicans, and they were able, through doing this, to understand a lot about cross-state and interstate ties, policy diffusion, what leads to ties, some of the factors that matter, even some surprising things, right? So one thing that surprised the authors is that gender and race identity variables are more likely to explain cross-state ties in these networks as opposed to party or state variables, which is interesting. Within state ties are more likely to be formed among those who are in the same party, same chamber, and of the same gender. They also put together a list of legislators with the highest centrality, both with respect to so-called in degree and out degree. So what does that mean? They were looking at the particular names of elected officials and the states that they were from, who have the most accounts sort of pointing to them, so the most other accounts following them, and those accounts who follow the most others. So the most edges pointing away from them, the most arrows pointing away from them, and the most arrows pointing into them, right? The most other accounts looking at them, and who look at the most others, so to speak. And these are really important when you think about messaging. Who is seeing what they are sharing, and who is listening to them? Who is paying attention? And I think this is the kind of work that we've been seeing more of, but that's really critical when we think about, again, policy diffusion and influence. It's very related, of course, to the work that we think about all the time when we think about helping our clients be more effective and impactful in public square analytics. And finally, I want to share some work that comes from myself, my lab, and my collaborators. And this is not related to elected officials, but it is related to social media, and in particular to misinformation, fake news, and media integrity. And this will be presented tomorrow at the Association for Computational Linguistics, which is a natural language processing conference. And I think this one is really exciting. It is the outcome of a large competition that took place at Penn State, sponsored by the Center for Socially Responsible AI. And what we did was we had 110 participants use large language models like ChatGPT to create 252 fake news stories. And then we had 84 participants. We invited everyone at Penn State. These were mostly students, Penn State undergrads mostly, some grad students, a few faculty who decided to participate to win a cash prize, to create fake news stories, and then to try to guess which were fake news and which were real news stories. And we found that large language models like ChatGPT were more effective, sadly, at detecting real news than our student participants, our human participants. However, for fake news detection, performance of large language models in humans was relatively comparable. Sadly, neither were very good, almost random, about 60% accurate. So it's really, really hard, essentially, to detect fake news versus real news for both humans and large language models is the sad truth of it. And that makes us really worried, right? It makes us really worried in the information environment and in social media. Something interesting, I thought, maybe the most interesting thing that we found in this work was when we asked our participants who generated the fake news using large language models, using ChatGPT, how did they do it? Especially our winners who generated really tricky fake news. They did not just ask ChatGPT, generate fake news, and then submit it. Oh, no, no. They asked ChatGPT, generate fake news. But then once they got that fake news, they asked ChatGPT something like, well, make it more believable, something that we called it iterative refinement. Or they would take ChatGPT's fake news story and then they would add some stuff, right? Like they would add citations or add a reputable source or even non-existent authorities. So we allowed them to take this fake news story and then, use ChatGPT or another large language model, but then, finesse it with their own human touch. And this kind of hybrid fake news was the most effective at deceiving our human participants. And that is a real concern. And that was kind of maybe the scariest thing about this. So, yeah. So all of that to say, actually, let me stop sharing, and just talk to you for a second. So all of that to say, with respect to AI and social media, one thing I think about a lot is the role that AI plays in the work we do at Public Square Analytics, because we do use AI. Public Square Analytics is committed to using AI ethically and responsibly in service to our clients. And we really want to be careful to walk this boundary appropriately, right? So we have to be very sure that that we keep on the cutting edge of understanding appropriate and ethical use of AI, especially in the social media landscape. So it's something that I'm working on actively and that all of us think about. And one of the reasons that we committed ourselves from the initial onset of the company to have an ethics officer. So one thing we want to do is keep you up to date on our research. We all have labs and students working with us while we wear our other hats as Penn State and University of Pittsburgh faculty, and that informs everything we do. So we'll keep you informed on our research, and we thank you for your interest.